And greetings, happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. With Todders and an Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. Coming up on today's show, Bob Vander Plaats going to join us at the bottom of the hour. We're going to have the return of Ask Me Anything. It's been a few weeks since we've been able to do this, so I trust, Todd, that we have some banger questions ready to go.
It's another eclectic mix.
All right, so we'll get to that coming up in the next hour. Want to let you know, those of you that bought the autographed copies of Richie Meets the Rainbow, thank you. They're in process of being mailed to you as we speak. All right, turns out mailing 2,500 things yourself may take you a little bit longer than you thought. All right, so
do you remember when we did the Whoever's Dumbest Last Loses t-shirts?
Oh, yes.
And I was in charge of basically the entire operation.
Yes.
It takes a long time.
Yeah, so we're in the process. First of all, we got the books late. All right, but hundreds of them got mailed out just this past weekend, the weekend prior, so they are on their way. So thank you guys very much for your patience. Also want to let you know now that the retail version of Richie Meets the Rainbow is available, and I have good news. The original category that Amazon was supposed to launch us in 2 weeks ago, we are now finally in. All right. We wanted to be launched in LGBTQ plus books from day one. Okay. And we were slated to do that. We now are listed in that category. Okay. So if you want to spend $15 for maybe the greatest troll you can ever pull off, all right, to have our book trending as a bestseller in that category, I don't know. I kind of think that would be fun, which is exactly why we did it. All right. So if you want to get your copy of Richie Meets the Rainbow, the retail edition, they're available right now at Amazon. Just $15 to see if you can help us now trend in our preferred, I guess I'll call it, our preferred category of LGBTQ FU plus books. If you guys want to get us trending there, now is the time to get yours because we are finally listed in that category. All right, so go to Amazon and look up Richie Meets the Rainbow, R-I-C-H-I-E, R-I-C-H-I-E, Richie Meets the Rainbow. You can still sponsor your copy for your local public school library as well. There's about 10,000 of those. I think every single one of those should have a copy of Richie inside. But not only will you be helping your local school board, I'm sure, with an effort that they will appreciate, but you'll also appreciate seeing Richie Meets the Rainbow trending among LGBTQ plus books here in the most demonic time of the year, Pride Month. All right, so go to Amazon, look for Richie Meets the Rainbow, R-I-C-H-I-E, for Richie Meets the Rainbow at Amazon. All right, and with that, let's get it started here now with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by 10 years ago today. Trump descended the elevator at Trump Tower in New York and made what ended up being a country-altering announcement.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
Tell yourself in that moment that in recent moments, we would see President Trump presiding over a military parade honoring the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army, at the same time trying to play good cop in the good cop, bad cop routine I think the U.S. and Israel are currently engaged in with Iran, who retaliated against Israel each night since Israel struck Iran Thursday night into Friday, sending ballistic missiles, some of them hypersonic, at various targets around Israel, primarily Tel Aviv. President Trump beckoned Iran to come to the negotiating table, while Israel continued to strike targets deep within Iran and establish air superiority. President Trump said last night,
Well, I hope there's going to be a deal. I think it's time for a deal, and we'll see what happens. But sometimes they have to fight it out, but we're going to see what happens. I think there's a good chance there'll be a deal.
In other news, law enforcement officers on Sunday night arrested Vance Bolter, who is accused of assassinating Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband at their home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. He also shot and injured another state lawmaker, John Hoffman, and his wife, who are expected to survive. Alpha News in the Gopher State obtained a purported hit list created by Bolter with over 60 Democrat leaders on it. However, on Saturday, as the investigation unfolded, Minnesota State Patrol released a photograph photograph of the interior of Bolter's vehicle showing tons of No Kings posters, as in the No Kings protests from over the weekend. More on that in a moment. By the way, Bolter used a police-looking vehicle and dressed up as a police officer, likely owing to the fact that he owned and operated an armed security service in the Twin Cities when he wasn't managing a 7-Eleven, running some weird African nonprofit, moonlighting as a charismatic preacher in the Congo, delivering bodies to funeral homes, or presenting baked goods to law enforcement officers. And he also had a sprawling property in the country with a wife and several children, but lived in some sort of halfway house with a couple of roommates in the city. Oh, and he was appointed by Governor Tim Walz to an advisory board back in 2019. Oh, and his wife also interned for Walz when he was in Congress. Got it? Good. Moving on, the No Kings protests went down this weekend all over the country, and I present to you the median attendee.
I'm just so scared. I'm 74 years old. I worry about everything, and I just am so scared and upset, and I don't understand why people voted for this person.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is, get a freaking grip, Grandma.
奶奶，抓紧时间。
Angst has been high over the weekend over President Trump's messaging on immigration after he released those dueling messages late last week on Truth Social, and reports circulated over the weekend that he's curbing deportation raids on hotels and agricultural businesses. This morning, Trump promised to double down on deportation efforts in the nation's largest cities. And finally, a PSA for fathers of girls.
Do you know how to tell if an egg is safe to eat? You'll want to be sure. You don't want to get sick, do you? Well, it's very easy. You just need a glass of water. See, when I put the egg in, and if it sinks, you're good to go. But if it floats, you're in trouble. So let's see what happens. You're good to go. The same analogy goes for your daughter's new boyfriend, who you found out just made your daughter cry. Now, if the body doesn't sink and it floats, you're in trouble. I mean the egg. Pardon me.
And that's what happened while we were away.
That is very, very good. Very good. All right. I am going to make an executive decision, and I just don't have much to say right now on this Minnesota killer, because I don't know what to say.
Those dots are pretty easy to connect there, Steve.
I mean,
give it a shot.
This is just a mind scrambler. I don't know what to think about it. And I haven't said much about it in terms of, any takes other than sharing news on social media all week long. I don't know what to think. And the whole story is odd. Very odd. So for now, we are going to set that aside. Okay? You guys all right with that? And
You're just no
let
fun.
more odd come out, because I'm sure that it will. Okay, you know me, I'm not in a hurry to be wrong. I can do wrong all by myself. I don't have to be in a hurry. Don't have to make things up. All right, but the story is tragic, but I also have no clue who this guy is. And the thing is, Aaron, if you have not had the time this weekend, or you tuned out a little bit with Father's Day, everything that Aaron shared with you is accurate. These are all angles that have emerged since these attempted shootings on Saturday. Actually, they were not attempted. They were consummated. And the get up, dude, that's like right out of a horror movie. Okay? I mean, I don't know what to think, man. The story is odd. So we're going to get a little bit more information before we think anything about it. All right? And that brings me to where I want to begin our conversation. I want to have a conversation about Israel and Iran and what continues over there in the Middle East, but from an angle maybe you have not heard yet, because I think this is a great time to remind everybody to be careful how much you believe coming from anonymous sources that are either from or about the Trump administration. And you have had a very public squabble between the two men that we kind of put as the faces of these two flanks within our coalition, Tucker Carlson and Mark Levin. It went very public over the weekend with each of them going at one another. So it wasn't just me kind of drafting those guys as people whose intellects I respect and who have earned the tremendous platforms and followings that they have. That was the real reason I kind of put them as the face of the two wings, because I just thought those would be faces that everybody would know, as opposed to, do you know who the Undersecretary of the Department of Defense is and the Assistant Director of National Intelligence? And the answer, of course, would be no, right? But everybody knows who those two guys are, so you would be able to then understand from there where our discussion was going to go. Well, these two guys went after one another, and I'm going to go out on a limb. And I don't think Tucker and Mark will be enjoying a Seder meal next weekend for the Sabbath fair.
Fair.
Or maybe not in any foreseeable days that end in Y, for that matter. Okay?
Correct.
All right. So, that notwithstanding, okay, that Cold War going hot, notwithstanding, they do represent these two wings. And within the Trump administration, these two wings of people are well represented. Because they're really the two wings and thoughts on foreign policy within the non-neocon base. All right? Because those people really don't have much of a place in the Republican Party anymore, and many of them have just become Democrats, which is kind of what they always were. Just Democrats. They're kind of the Democrats who didn't hate America. Well, now they've become, what's happened is that what's left of the next iteration of Democrats who don't hate America, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., we've absorbed all those people. And now they've become Democrats who hate Americans. Right? Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Okay. They may not be communists. They just hate Americans. Okay. And I'm just telling you right now, a lot of what you're being told in the press, did Israel formally ask the U.S. to join the war? That was a headline from an anonymous source over the weekend. Here was another one. Netanyahu and the Israelis wanted to target Ayatollah Khomeini's private residence, and Trump told them no. All right. I have no idea which of these things are true and which are not, and neither does anybody within the sound of my voice. But you need to understand that there's a lot of internal palace intrigue now. I mean, I don't know that a president of the United States has ever been asked about what a commentator on his own side, who's part of what we know today as alternative media, said about him, the way the president was asked over the weekend about Tucker Carlson's comments. Now, could you imagine? Well, I would not presume that there is anybody within lefty alternative media that has half of the IQ of Tucker Carlson to even come up with an analogy. There isn't one. I just don't think these kinds of internal debates are permitted on their side. So everything's about will to power and compliance. And you signal your virtue by signaling that you're compliant. Here's my Ukraine flag. Here's my mask, right? We've talked about that before. So I don't know that there is any precedent for this ever happening on the left. But on our side, there's been nothing like this. And some of it's just the newness of alternative media. We didn't really have a lot of alternative media most of our lives. But I want to start there. I would warn you to not get emotionally attached one way or the other to news stories or even quotes from people. Even quotes from the president. I would instead urge you just to watch what people do and like none of what they say. Because at the very least, some form, as Aaron pointed out in his montage, some form of good cop, bad cop has been going on here for several weeks between Trump and Netanyahu. I mean, there were stories the previous weekend and the previous weekend before that from quote-unquote anonymous sources that Trump had, signaled to Israel he did not support a strike against Iran. All right? We have no clue what is going on. I think there are probably good people that want that to be the case because it helps with whatever effort we are undertaking. But you're watching various coalitions now within the White House and within the administration on our own side, leaking against each other. And now with what's going on with Tucker and Mark, by name, going after each other. So I think we should start there with, I just would be very careful about what information you are following that you get attached to. Instead, I would actually just watch what the people that are making the decisions actually are doing and not what any of them are saying. Thoughts on that first?
Yeah, I actually had a thought in my head based on your fantastic T-shirt while you're saying that. When they go to the national championship in Indianapolis, Gene Hackman pulls out the great coaching tool out. He watches the guys into the big gym, the big city. He pulls out the tape measure, has them tape. The dimensions are the exact same as your gym back home.
Right.
You're describing like there's nothing like that in the story that you can tether reality to. We have no idea on many fronts what is just the plumb line, what is real.
Right. I don't know. I would caution. I think it's premature. I said this on Friday. I still think it is premature to make it look as if there will any collateral damage from the devastation of this preemptive strike by Israel. I think it is premature to do victory laps about, so far I agree. All the things that the Tucker wing warned about, Russia's not coming to anybody's aid. China's not coming to anybody's aid. The BRICS nations aren't coming to anybody's aid. But I would caution taking too many victory laps where that's concerned yet, because there's nothing like this. This is a precedent setter right here. I'm just telling you this. I think this is the most, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but instead I find it to be an ironic historical compliment. Okay, this is the most devastating preemptive strike I think that we have seen in the world since Blitzkrieg. What Iran has managed to, or what Israel has managed to do to Iran is continuing to do to Iran. I mean, even Iran's countermeasures, many of those missiles, yes, they've killed some Israelis, but what is it? 80-90% of those missiles are getting shot down. And they're also getting shot down from other countries other than Israel, right? So I think that we're at a moment in history right now that is very difficult to compare to another moment. So I would be cautious about making grand projections of what the next 3 or 4 steps from this are going to be.
Because so much depends on the psychology altered and changing, like I said last week, on any given moment. I mean, what does the average person on the street think about you mentioned the 80-90% factor, but missiles are getting through.
Yep.
How sustainable is that in Israel? I don't know the answer to that question. And the people have a thumb on the scale in Israel in a way that they may or may not. We talked about, will there be that uprising in Iran that we also talked about?
Does China just walk away from the negotiating trade negotiating table because they're about to get the first bill, a petro bill, with what's going on with Iran? Does Iran shut down the Straits of Hormuz to play hardball because the Ayatollahs basically are thinking we're in survival mode now, and so things we would not have done before we have to do, otherwise we're over with. Do the people take to the streets? I mean again, there's just a lot of things that we cannot foresee right now. And I would urge caution in terms of projecting what the next 3 to 4 steps after what we're witnessing right now are going to be.
Yeah, and you have to think that if they have not gone, I mean, they are crazy. The Iranian regime is crazy in terms of their overall worldview, is basically dominated by this desire to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. But in terms of pragmatic thinking, they're doing second, third, and fourth order thinking as well. If they shut down Hormuz, they have to know that would prompt other countries to get involved here, I think, as much as anything that's happening right now. But just to give you kind of a big picture idea with what I think is happening right here, on June, let's say 13th, that would have been what? June 12th. That would have been Thursday, right? Who would you have said is probably the dominant power in the Middle East? Who would you have said that to be? Maybe Iran? Israel is in there somewhere, but it's a question mark, regardless. Who do you think is the dominant power now?
It's unquestionable.
Who's going to cross Israel at this point?
I agree. They are sending a message.
So that just kind of gives you a big picture kind of a big picture view of how historic this actually is, regardless of whether or not you think it's a good idea, what Israel is doing, whether or not we should get involved, all of that. I just want to give you kind of what I think is an objective big picture view.
At the very least, I think we can say this. There has not been any evidence for the instant alarmism that has been assumed by the Tucker Carlson wing, game theorying out this scenario for the last few years. None of that alarmism has come to any form of fruition whatsoever. And just to give you an example of what I mean by being careful to project, all right? And I'm not trying to say like I'm above it all. I'm not the stupid idiot on Survivor when they merge into two tribes acts like, well, I'm not going to join a tribe, okay? Because I'm above it all. I'm not entirely sure which tribe to join. I'm fine joining your tribe once I'm sure which tribe there is to join. I'm learning here. Because the one thing I've learned since 9/11 is to not be overly dogmatic about foreign policy anymore. And that we're this is not even the same as fighting Mussolini or Hitler as previous generations did, or even Stalin and Khrushchev and Brezhnev. These were still countries that had some rootedness in Western civilization at some period in time. Obviously, Germany and Italy way more than Russia, but Russia still had some rootedness in Western civilization as well. Now we're talking about parts of the world and countries that have no rootedness in Western civilization at all. And in many cases, their ancestors and forefathers were against Western civilization. So it's not that I am, I'm not here to play moral equivalent referee. I'm not signing up for the striped shirt to, referee the Mark Levin, Tucker Carlson wing fight. I'm telling you, I'm not qualified to referee it, is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm learning here in real time. I think all of us are to some degree. Like I told you last week, two things I told you last week have proven to be true. Number one, you need to understand the Middle East is more nuanced than Israel versus Islam, and there are plenty of Muslim and particularly the Arab Muslim countries that also do not like Iran and do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon either. At the very least, that has played itself out, has it not? That has played itself out. That doesn't mean, by the way, that Israel has an indefinite amount of rope and an indefinite clock. They can, to keep going over and over and over again. That's not what that means, because again, the psychology changes, like we talked about on Friday. Local political, I think everyone right now is kind of waiting to see where's all this Iranian resistance that we have heard so much about, over the last few years. Will it rise up? So far, it has not. Okay. I know a lot of the Mark Levin wing thought that Elon Musk turning the internet back on with Starlink, because the Ayatollahs turned it all off, trying to shut the country down and shut off access to outside media. Elon Musk came in, turned Starlink right on. And I know a lot of the Mark Levin wing thought that might encourage a mass uprising of the people. Bibi Netanyahu is openly calling for a mass uprising of the Iranian people. We have seen no evidence of that so far. Okay? So there's no precedent for this, is what I'm trying to tell you. And the closest thing is when we went into Iraq over weapons of mass destruction. But what the Israelis are doing here is overall way more. I mean, the mass targeting for assassination and elimination of leaders throughout this is way more pinpoint than what we even tried to do in Iraq 20 years ago. I don't think there's any precedent for this at all. None. Not to mention, everybody knew that we were gearing up for war with Iraq both times, okay? It was just a question of if and not when. In this case, Israel did to Iran what largely, again, I'm not drawing a moral equivalency, but situationally, Israel did to Iran what Iran's proxies did to Israel on October 7th, just completely blindsided them. So you're watching the board being reset as we speak. And some things that both sides, I would say up till this point, the Tucker Carlson wing has been more wrong than the Mark Levin wing. I think if we're going to be intellectually honest, we have to say that. That's true up to this point. Fair?
Yeah, so far.
But it's been a week.
But it's been a week. And I do think some of the jovialness of the Mark Levin wing, it's a little premature yet. Okay? Like the whole Starlink going on didn't instantly spark a weekend uprising in Iran. Maybe it will here in a couple of days. I'd love for that. To me, that is the best case scenario. Now that, see, going back and arguing about whether this should have happened is a waste of your time. The deed is done. Okay? The deed is done regardless of what you think about it. This is the world in which we live in now. And so since this is the world in which we live in now, what is the best case scenario outcome? To me, the best case scenario outcome is an uprising of the people so that the West doesn't have to do the ratio of how much can we devastate the Iranians to the point then that they maybe push some buttons they haven't pushed in the past because they know now that they are in survival mode, like the Straits of Hormuz, for example. Yes, the rest of the world would be really pissed at Iran for doing that, but Iran's not seeing a lot of its benefactors come to its aid right now. They could decide to shut that thing down, and you can see gas at $5 a gallon here this summer because that's their leverage point to get the Chinese in, right? You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of intrigue. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is there is a lot of intrigue still to come. And a lot of unintended consequences. For now, here's what we know. The Iranian regime has been among the most evil regimes on this planet for decades. All right. They have made it very clear they have targeted Israel for extinction most of y'all's entire lives. If you're under the age of 60 listening to this, that's the only world you have ever known. Okay, you were born into a world of Iran of the predecessor Ayatollahs taking American hostages for 444 days. Okay. Israel just successfully launched among the most devastating preemptive strikes in modern world warfare, in the history of modern warfare. And so far, all of the fears of how this could spill over into a multilateral, multi-regional conflict because of various entanglements have not been realized. Nor has, though, the hoped-for uprising of the young Iranian people been realized either. Is that fair? Do we know? Is there anything else we know other than those four things?
No.
So then I think we need to let a few more things play out. And I think while they're playing out, there's going to be a lot of game theory and palace intrigue within our own side. And for every time that you're watching Tucker and Mark go back and forth with each other, there's 10 people behind them who matter a lot in government that represent these two sides that are trying to get their narrative and message out. Because there are there's the law of unintended consequences to be dealt with here. And then B, if those unintended consequences don't line up with your narrative is toast. I mean, we are, just as the failures of the U.S. to subdue the Middle East altered the amount of "we're America, bitch" that, jingoism on the right for the next generation, right? We're living through that right now.
Sure.
What unintended consequences do and do not stem from this are going to dramatically alter how we feel about an alliance with Israel in the Middle East moving forward. If this can largely be an event contained to Iran, that at the very least greatly diminishes the Iranian regime, if not leads to it internally being toppled, like what happened with the Soviet Union, then this will dramatically alter the landscape of the Middle East moving forward. And the rest of our lives will be, I think, better for it. If, however, the cattle prodding of the Iranian people does not happen and the Iranian government decides to get more desperate, and that could lead to another. Then I'm just saying, right now, the early returns are not good for the Tucker Carlson wing. If this were election night for Mideast policy, and I was on the desk at the Blaze analyzing the early returns, I would be saying, listen, there's a lot of the districts that are friendly to the Tucker wing still to come in, but their turnout's going to have to be pretty high given how things are starting out. I'd at least say that. Fair?
Yeah.
But I'd also tell the Levin wing I wouldn't be prepping, that victory speech for later tonight quite yet. I'd maybe wait a little bit longer before I started prepping that victory speech. So I'm not claiming I'm above it all. I'm claiming I don't know it all. And we're all going to learn what the outcome of this unprecedented moment is. Listen, if this was so simple, Israel would have done this before and not waited 30 years to do it. Okay? It's not simple. So we're about to find out what the real law of unintended consequences of all this truly is. Folks, we're brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. They are concerned, as you should be, about a recent bombshell report, the so-called abortion pill. It is 10 times more dangerous than what the FDA originally claimed. A lot of that going around these days, by the way. 11% of women experiencing, quote, serious adverse events. Unfortunately, and even more horrifyingly, the abortion pill is about 60% of all baby kills done in America today. So while we should rejoice that we're seeing all these Planned Parenthood clinics close around the country, including in my home state of Iowa, we are now in a position where basically every single mailbox in America can become an abortion mill. And often with dangerous consequences and side effects, not counting when it's quote-unquote successful, then it has a 100% murder rate. All right, so this is why you want to support our friends over at Preborn. They're literally on the ground. They're literally doing soul-to-soul combat against the spirit of the age to save these babies from their moms. And then I would go so far as to say save their moms from themselves. Because I do think more times than not, and we just played this out in the last election, the murder of your own child can absolutely stain your soul, harden the heart towards the things of God, towards empathy, towards compassion, real empathy, real compassion. And you'll start shouting your baby kill with, shall we call it, pride. So last year alone, Preborn saved almost 70,000 babies, and our partnership with them here at The Blaze through you was a big part in that. Let's do even more this year. Dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone, make a tax-deductible donation to Preborn today. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. All right, let's welcome in our good friend, Bob Vander Plaats. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Let me give a shout out to Preborn. Love the work that they do. So if you guys can support them, go ahead and do that. We need more of that, not less of that.
Amen to that. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to lay this out for the audience, and then I'm going to open up. I'm going to give you an open-ended question, just kind of let you take it away.
Sure.
All right. So you might be the only person I know, and it would be a very short list of people, period, who could check all of the forthcoming boxes, okay? You personally know the current ambassador to Israel and the current Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Box checked, right? You currently know, you personally know the President of the United States. Box checked, right? You personally know Tucker Carlson. Box checked. You've been to Israel numerous times, and you have your upcoming leadership summit, but the last couple of years that has had a very heavy presence from those who also either live in Israel or are involved there. They give briefings about what's happening there and throughout the Middle East, right? So, I mean, you have a broad spectrum of way more than I do firsthand of all the various ideologies on our side about this moment and what led to it, et cetera, et cetera. So rather than teeing up a specific question, I think the best thing I could do is what I just did. Just let the audience know kind of that the amount of associations and that you have to all the various perspectives that are being subjected to right now on this. And then just the floor is now yours. And just ask you, what do you think?
And probably the one as you're going through that list there, one I thought of is I'm also on the advisory board of All Israel News, which is Joel Rosenberg's. A lot of your audience will know who Joel is, best-selling author. But Steve, when I first went to Israel, it was back in 2014. And that's when Hamas was shooting missiles into Israel, into trying to get Jerusalem, but for sure they're getting across the Gaza Strip, trying to blow things up. Obama declared Tel Aviv a no airspace. I mean, you couldn't fly into Tel Aviv. And I remember Rick Santorum said, hey, do you want to go to Israel? I said, I don't know if it sounds like a really good idea. I haven't been there. I'd love to go to Israel, but right now it doesn't sound like a great idea. And he said, now's the exact time we should go to Israel. So there's about a dozen of us who went to Israel at that time. Obviously, no tourism going on because of the missiles. You were hearing sirens at different times. At one time, Rick Santorum and I took shelter together in a stairwell together. And then Israelis just got about their daily life and they're living their life. Just like we'd get a tornado siren, we take cover, but pretty soon you figure, the storm's gone. Now I'm going to get out and check out my yard, my branches. That's kind of what they did. And I remember we went to a lot of military installations. We got a tour and a briefing of the Iron Dome. We went down to the Gaza Strip. We met military people. But I remember one conversation in particular, and that was Dory Gold. And Dory Gold was an advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And he says, you put your focus on Hamas, and Hamas is driving the news today. He said, don't ever take your eyes off of Iran. Iran has a mission statement. It's very clear, and that's to kill the little Satan, wipe it off the map, which is the nation of Israel, and then to kill the big Satan, wipe it off the map, that is the United States of America. And he said they're funding Hamas, they're funding Hezbollah, they're funding the Houthis, they're funding all of this, but that is their primary target, that's their primary objective. Then you take a look at President Trump, Mike Huckabee, know both of them. They know that a nuclear Iran is a dangerous entity for a lot of reasons, not only for the region and for the nation of Israel, but for the entire region and the entire world if you allow that reckless regime to have its hands on nuclear weapons. They have not abided by any red line whatsoever. They've always crossed the red lines. They've always flirted. They always flaunted by going over the red lines.
This is an important point. We're here because Trump offered them a deal for months.
All kinds of deals.
And they would not take him up on it.
As a matter of fact,
and Trump has proven he's willing to make deals with everybody in the Middle East that is willing to sit down. So it's not like they have any kind of excuse at all.
Yeah. And I really believe President Trump's heart is, I want peace in that region. Because he knows economic stability, he knows it's going to benefit the United States of America. He also knows our commitment to the nation of Israel, not just from a biblical standpoint, which we believe, and I believe he believes as well, but also from a strategic ally in the hostile region of the Middle East. And so they flaunted this red line. President Trump's offered him a lot of deals. Mike Huckabee, who I know very well, you know very well, now the ambassador to Israel. Same kind of thing is that right now, when Israel said, we're going to uproot Hamas after what they did on October 7, 2023, we're going to take it out. We're going to uproot that entire place. And President Trump basically echoed that by saying, we could make the Gaza Strip the Riviera of the Middle East. Okay? It's beautiful territory. But if you're going to uproot it by every stretch, you have to go after Iran. And I think right now, Israel sees an opening. I've been quite impressed by their strategic nature of taking out military leaders and saying we are going to weaken Iran and destroy its mission and its intent and empower the people of Iran who don't want this reckless regime either to take it over. You go to the flip side with Tucker Carlson. Tucker and I have been friends for quite a while, and he and I have had conversations on Israel. I think Tucker, more than anything, and even though I tweeted by saying I think Tucker's wrong on this one, and I believe President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and Mike Huckabee are right on this one, I think Tucker's trying to put a caution flag of this love affair we have with the nation of Israel, that we're just going to dance to whatever tune that they start to play, that we're going to be right in bed and we're going to put our resources to another foreign war. I get that. I get that. But you take a look at everything that's in play right now, I fully believe Benjamin Netanyahu's right. I believe it was the right to defend and protect the nation of Israel. I think he's doing exactly what he's trying to do. And I think where Trump said to Iran and the regime, saying, listen, I gave you every plausible deal there was. You didn't take it. Now you're going to suffer the consequences. I beg you to make whatever deal you can now to make this stop. Because Israel's not done yet. From my understanding, they got a couple of weeks of strategic hits yet planned out.
So I want to, again, reiterate. I'm not trying to play referee here between the Levin and Carlson camps and their views on this. I know both these guys, not really well, but I don't know Tucker nearly as well as you do, for example, but I do know both of them. They've both platformed me in the past. They've both been kind to me in the past. I have a lot of respect for both of them. When you hear me use the phrase, we're not a nation of immigrants, we're a nation of citizens, I ripped that right off from Mark Levin. Okay. And there have been plenty of times when, Tucker's last few years on Fox, that, it was like his show and our show, it felt like it was a mind meld. Okay. So it's not that I'm ever opposed to having a dog in the fight. I really don't, because I don't know how this is going to play out. So I'm not trying to be above it all. I'm just saying I don't know it all. Okay. And because the level of devastation of this preemptive strike from Israel has, I think, even shook the confidence of the co-belligerents of Iran. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that were surmised to immediately get involved should Israel ever do this are quiet as kept right now. Now, did they get a message? Don't mess with us. Are they recalibrating how they're going to respond? There are things that we don't yet know. Okay. Clearly, in the immediate aftermath, the concerns that Tucker Carlson wing had of instant spillover, regional conflict, the BRICS nations would respond, China would respond. None of that has happened. Okay. But I would also say to the Levin wing to pretend as if that will be the case if this goes on indefinitely. I wouldn't do that either. Okay. I think we are watching a complete reshaping of the Middle East and U.S. foreign policy towards Israel and the level of engagement it will do in this part of the world. This is the event I think that's going to shape for the next generation of what this is going to look like. And if the Levin wing is by and large vindicated, our policy moving forward will favor more of what they're saying. And if the Carlson wing, is vindicated by what comes later, then our foreign policy in the future, by and large, I think will tilt in that direction. I just think right now there are things we don't know. Okay.
I think what you just said, Steve, that's very well said, because I'm not a know-it-all. I'm not above it all either. And I think you're exactly right from the Carlson wing to, say, the Levin wing. What I also know, though, is Yakil Leiter, who was here to speak at our leadership summit, which is coming up Friday, July 11, last year. He's now the ambassador of Israel to the United States. And when Yakil Leiter came, the reason we had him speak at our leadership summit, he lost his son in that Hamas war. And his son was the oldest intelligent officer that was lost. I believe he had 4 or 5 children at the time when he was lost. And Yakil is one of the brightest intellects on Middle East everything. And so we had him speak at our leadership summit. And Yakil said this, you're dealing with pure evil. They raise these kids on the breast milk of we have to annihilate Israel and the Jews, and we have to annihilate the United States, period, full stop. He said, now everybody's going to stand with Israel initially after the October 7 invasion, 2023. He said, but what happens, and he was almost foreshadowing this, what happens when we really do protect and defend ourselves? And they see Iran as a threat, and they're basically saying, you can't leave Iran unchecked anymore. You've got to make them pay a price. And they'd even say, even if the aftermath is what Carlson is saying, we have to inflict, we're not taking this anymore. And so he's saying, were they going to stand with us post, like we're talking right now, current time? Mm-hmm. And I think what you're seeing with President Trump did not want this to happen. President Trump wanted every deal. Matter of fact, Marco Rubio went out and said, listen, Israel is acting on its own right now. We're not. You
don't think there was any kind of subterfuge here with Netanyahu and Trump?
I think what it is that Netanyahu said, no, we need to do this. And now Trump's saying, okay, they did it. Our hands aren't on it. But now Iran, make the deal. Make the deal before all heck breaks loose. I think everybody has always understood between Israel and Iran, that's a tinderbox. I mean, that's biblical. That's way back in the Old Testament times. This is a tinderbox. What's going to happen out of this? I don't know. But do I believe Israel has a right to protect and defend itself? I believe it does. I think they're making the right calls right now. And one last thing, Steve. Joel Rosenberg wrote a great piece in All Israel News about Netanyahu's goal to reshape the dynamics in the Middle East. That's what he's trying to do right now. I think he believes he has an opportunity, and he's going to take it.
I mean, just to show how divided Trump's own coalition is on this. Earlier this morning, the aforementioned Tucker Carlson was on with Steve Bannon. Right, so I mean, these are probably the two most respected thought leaders in terms of MAGA as a coalition. Okay, and Carlson just said to Steve Bannon earlier this morning, "quote I don't want my country to be further weakened or destroyed by another one of these wars. And if you can't connect the dots after 25 years of this crap, you're either too dumb to participate in the conversation or you're Mark Levin, just a liar who doesn't care." End quote. Okay, so again, this is the internal dialogue we're having on our own side. All right, and I urge the audience at the top to be very suspicious of anything that says it's anonymous to or from the White House. These coalitions are very well represented in the White House. They're all leaking against one another right now because everybody understands however the law of unintended consequences plays out here, your narrative, if it's on the wrong side, you're toast in the next generation. All right. If Tucker's wing turns out to be prophetic, our relationship with Israel will never be as cozy as the previous generation had it ever again. It will never happen again. On the other hand, if Tucker and his group now look like the climate alarmist of American foreign policy, they'll absolutely be discredited. One of those things or the other is going to happen. So there's a lot riding on this in terms of future political positioning as well.
I think you're right. The two conclusions that Tucker offers that I think are way too simplified and way too extreme on either end. Either you're lying, which I do not think Mark Levin is lying, or that you're too stupid to take. I don't think that's the case either. What Tucker has found out through the reading of Scripture, and Nina and I have had these conversations, he is realizing that everything is coming down to more a deal. I mean, the trans situation, all that, it's a spiritual war. This is good versus evil. I would argue what you're seeing in the Middle East right now is good versus evil. Does that mean Israel's perfect? Does that mean Netanyahu's? Absolutely not. But it is good versus evil. And what Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah have been fostering, that has been evil about we're going to kill, we're going to annihilate, we're going to wipe this nation off the earth. How do you deal with that mission statement? You cannot deal with a mission statement like that. You either have to cage it or kill it. I mean, that's the only way you can deal with it.
Todd and Aaron, we got about 90 seconds here. What do you guys think real quick?
What you said about the trans issue, I think, is instructive for the understanding at least part of the Tucker wing, because there's just a lot of people on that side that are this doesn't have everything to do with Israel per se, but a sense of we are going to be drawn into using our blood and treasure overseas again when LA is falling. They're transing our kids. We are not doing that. We have got to be a strong America first before we can save anybody overseas. I think there's a lot of that within the Tucker wing.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Aaron?
Yeah, I just think trying to remove as much baggage as possible, which is hard to do because we're all human beings, but trying to remove as much baggage, what you think of Israel, what your eschatological views are. If you are in the Christian West, and this does not mean that we should necessarily get involved over there at all, I think we're having the wrong arguments. I think the arguments is, does Iran want a nuclear weapon? And is that good for the Christian West at large? The answer to that question, I think, is no, because I've heard it my entire life. Their primary worldview is using force to annihilate a specific group of people, the little Satan, and then maybe the big Satan or the great Satan next, referring to the United States. So does that mean, no, if we've got somebody to do our dirty work for us, which Israel has proven over the last few days they are ready and willing and capable of doing, then I think that's a deal that I would take.
And I think here, Aaron,
10 seconds.
Israel did not say, United States, I need your approval. They went in on their own to do this thing.
Hour 2 is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can take advantage of that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, @Deace Show on YouTube. Please go subscribe there, @Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you would not mind, if you love the podcast version of the program, leave us a 5-star review. Thanks to all of you that have done that. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're on Apple iTunes, follow, and that makes sure that every time we do one of these new episodes, it shows up in your feed every single time. And thanks to all of you that have done that for us as well. And thanks to our friends over at Relief Factor, there's pretty good odds that chronic pain you're struggling with, if you use Relief Factor, you won't have to be struggling with it anymore. Now, I didn't say perfect odds, didn't say 100%. 70%, those pretty good odds. Now, where do we get that number from? Well, over the years, around 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor. 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less, they stuck with the product long term. So why don't you see if you don't see a difference in your chronic pain, that's that lingering achiness, soreness, and stiffness in your back, knees, your neck, your hips, that just won't go away, why don't you see if you don't see a difference in that pain in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com? You could be our next testimonial, like Deborah Ann from Massachusetts. She turned to Relief Factor and said, quote, "I absolutely love now how I am feeling." So you might be the very next one. Cost you $20 to find out, though, for 70% odds. I think that's a pretty good value bet. ReliefFactor.com is where you can go. That's ReliefFactor.com, or call them at 800, the number 4-RELIEF. That's 800, the number 4-RELIEF. And in case you missed it from the top of the show, Amazon has finally put Richie Meets the Rainbow in the category we wanted it in from the very beginning. So you guys can now get our book trending during Pride Month, just in time for Pride Month. Now here in the heart of darkness of Pride Month here at the Ides of June, you guys can now help us be trending in LGBTQ plus books, and I can't think of a more fitting book, at least that's not inspired, to be trending in that category this month than Richie Meets the Rainbow. So if you want to get your retail copy, go to Amazon, search for Richie Meets the Rainbow, RICHIE. Go to Amazon, search for Richie Meets the Rainbow. Cost you just $15 to help us get trending in that category. You can also sponsor the government school library in your hood. There's about 10,000 of those. I think every single one of them needs a copy of Richie, since every single one of them are pretty much promoting the agenda of Pride Month to your kids. So let's actually make sure we put the origin of where this all came from in there as well, shall we? All right, so search for Richie Meets the Rainbow over at Amazon. That's Richie Meets the Rainbow over at Amazon. And if you ordered one of the special edition autograph copies, they're on the way. We're fulfilling them as we speak. So be patient. It's taking longer to mail out 2,500 copies of books than we ever imagined. That's a lot. But they're coming, all right? Just dropped hundreds of them off at the post office on Saturday, so they are coming, all right? So search for Richie Meets the Rainbow on Amazon, RICHIE, for Richie Meets the Rainbow on Amazon. All right, are we ready for the return of Ask Me Anything?
We're going to find out.
All right, given all that's going on in the world, I would suspect the questions should be good. So
you would...
don't tell me I'm about to be disappointed.
I don't know if you're going to be disappointed, but... what I find on there and what people want to talk about often has little to do with what's going on in the world.
Okay. Well, that's why we have you filter the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't just randomly pick them. So you guys submit the questions on our Facebook page. Todd has selected said questions, none of which I have yet to see. I have not peeked ahead of time to see what you guys posted, nor what Todd picked. I'm about to find out right now as Aaron kicks us off.
Paul Kasprek is first, who asks, when God himself speaks of building up treasures in heaven and not building up treasures on earth where moth and rust decay, what are these treasures we are building up? How can we build up treasures when works don't matter? How can you build a treasure in heaven with just faith? Building and storing are action verbs, meaning something has to be done in order to gain them.
Well, number one, you answered your own question. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question. Because you answered your own question. I mean, it seems to me what you're trying to ask is a Catholic question. I mean, if you were just asking that question as a standalone, then I would have given the answer that you gave. By and large, that's like the third time I've said that today. Somebody's drunk already. Okay. But I would have given much of the answer that you just gave. Okay. So, but tell me where I'm confused here, because he kind of answered his own question. So I presume I'm to take this as a Catholic questioning faith alone for justification. Because is that the context of the question that I should answer?
Well, it's what is a treasure in heaven? I think he's trying to get to that. What is it? How is that built up?
Well,
and so I can see it as a Catholic question, but I also think there's just a defining of terms that are helpful for anybody. What are we talking about?
Well, let me just say this again. There aren't any Protestants that believe that faith alone means that it doesn't produce any good works or fruits. No Protestant believes that. And if anybody's ever told you that, then they probably aren't a Christian or are so badly catechized that they should question where they're going to church. Okay? So the debate comes from the debate largely stems traditionally between Catholics and Protestants on this question, in that, do good works produce faith, or does faith produce good works? We're not arguing over whether or not good works are necessary as a demonstrative fruit. Now, as a Protestant, I would say that someone's sincere repentance on their deathbed after a lifetime of rejecting the grace of God, someone's sincere repentance on their deathbed and calling out to Christ at the last minute, that's their fruit. So that would be an act of demonstrative fruit if that confession of faith was truly heartfelt. Okay? And then we get into arguments about what Jesus, let me, you know what? Jesus is going to explain this better than me. So why don't I just quote him? Okay. So Jesus tells a parable about some workers that had been working for the master for a long period of time. And then some people just kind of show up interested in joining the workforce here. They're hiring at the kingdom of God, okay? And some new people show up. All right, the previous job they had was not very fulfilling and didn't pay very well. And they found out, wait a minute, this job is because the wages of sin is death, right? Okay, so they're like, well, those wages aren't very good. And you guys' wages over here are eternal life. I'm going to apply for a job over here. All right, I'm going to come work over here. Okay? And from the day they are hired, they are given the exact same wage as the people that had been there all along. And the people that had been there all along balk right away and say, hey, wait a second here. We've been here this entire time. Why are the guys that just started here day one, why are they earning the same wage? Follow my language exactly. Don't interpret what I'm saying. Listen to the words I'm using. Okay? I'm using the term wage on purpose. Why are they getting the same wage as me when I've been here all along? Christ's answer to them is to essentially say, first of all, number one, I'm the boss. I own this joint, so I can pay anybody what I want. How you like them apples? Okay? And to put it in a micro sense, I own this joint here called the Steve Day Show. So I can't quite pay Todd and Aaron whatever I want because I can't pay you more money than I actually have, right? I can't do that, all right? But I can pay you as much or as little of that money that I actually have as I want. And you guys can decide whether you want to work here or not, right? Okay, All right. So that's number one. You know, there are several times in the Bible, Old and New Testament, where God says, shut your hole and know your role because I said so. I like them apples. And there are other times where he's happy to explain why things are the way they are, you know, but you're not always entitled to an explanation. You're not God. And chances are, my guess is it's not that God loses his patience, doesn't offer you an explanation. Don't personify God the way that we struggle with our emotions. My guess is on things that we can understand, God reveals, and on things that we couldn't and don't need to understand, he doesn't. Because that's how a holy and righteous God probably thinks. Okay? It's just our understanding of what those things we need to know might be different than his because he's holy and righteous and we're not. So Jesus, going back to the parable here, Jesus says that you guys are all, I can decide, number one, who makes what. I'm the boss here. But secondly, just to answer your question, I've not done anything that's not equitable. I am paying the same wage. But then he says to them what amounts to, but the fact that you guys have been here longer than them, who's earned more of an income? Aaron decides he wants to leave, take another job. I may decide to replace Aaron with someone that I pay the same wage to. But the fact that Aaron has worked here for 10 years, who would have earned more income from me, Aaron, you or the person I just hired?
Me.
You. Because your faithfulness here for the period of time that you were here longer than that person means you were paid the same wage, but who earned more income?
Me.
You did. Is this beginning to make some sense now? The distinction I'm trying to draw here. Okay? So there is a meritocracy in the kingdom of heaven. Now, it's not, again, there's no sin there. So, you know, being the last person picked on Team Heaven doesn't come with the same stigma as getting around when you guys are doing dodgeball picks in elementary school gym class and you're picked last, okay? I mean, you're still getting way better of a deal than you were ever entitled for. But the more faithful you are here, the more you are rewarded there. So back to what I said a minute ago. The elderly person who rejected God their entire lives and has an earnest, sincere repentance and calling out to Christ on their deathbed, are they given the same wage of salvation as the person that was there and faithful for many, many years of their earthly life? Are they given the same wage? Are they given the same one? Yes. Have they, however, will they be awarded the same income? First of all, that person that did not have and rejected God and did not have them as an active part of their lives probably made a lot of terrible life choices that the person who's got the Holy Spirit in their life doesn't make. So there were consequences for that, right? Okay. And then you'll feel those consequences when you get to the next life that you didn't store up the amount of treasure in heaven as the person who was faithful did. Now you are both given salvation. You both earned the same wage. But the level of faithfulness of the one who was more faithful longer than you means they earned more of an income. Did I draw this distinction okay? Would anybody add, subtract, multiply, divide from it?
Yeah, I think just still lacking. And the part that was interesting to me is highlighting ultimately what is a treasure in heaven? And is there a lot of breadth to that? Is it a more refined issue? Is it not really a Protestant Catholic question?
It's the love you showed and showed to others. It's the faithful obedience you showed to Christ. Well, what's a treasure in heaven? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. How did you apply that in every aspect of your life? Because that would have produced treasure. And then the second is just like it. Love my neighbor as I love myself. How did I apply that to my life? Apply. We have to apply that. Okay? Now, the Catholic Protestant argument comes from, does applying that produce faith, or out of faith do I apply that? All right? That is the argument. But no one is arguing on either side of this divide that there has to be some demonstrative level of fruit there that is demonstrated. The argument is, what is the source of that fruit? Is that good for that question?
Yeah, I think it's good. There's the I don't think it's helpful in the current conversation. A lot of people use the thief on the cross as that's definitive for what is required of everybody. Well, isn't that the extreme version? Most people aren't on the cross. Most people are more subject to, as Steve, I think it was just last week, forgive me, I don't remember the context, but that we have to die daily. Mm-hmm. Apply. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very helpful. I just think I see a very common retort to questions like this is, look at the thief on the cross, didn't have to do anything.
But I would take that back to the parable that I just cited.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not that he didn't do anything. He repented to Lord God Almighty. That's number one. Okay. So that is an active demonstrative fruit. Okay. So he will be given the same wage as the disciples. He'll be given the same wage as the disciples. However, will he earn the same income in terms of the kingdom of God as the disciples? Will the income be the same? No, because they were faithful for longer than this individual was, but they were paid the same wage.
All right. Only dangling participle that I would like to add. May I have some more of your money, please, Steve? Next, Jimmy Newlawn says, God delivers manna to the Israelites 6 days out of 7, saying one thing about the Sabbath, and Jesus and his disciples pick grain while walking through a field on the Sabbath, saying something different. Which message is more important for us now? Do nothing on the Sabbath, or go ahead and do what needs to be done?
I would dispute the entire premise of your question. Nobody said anything different. And the God who worked for 6 days and rested on the seventh is Jesus. One God, triune, forever and ever. So I think the premise of your question is flawed. And these are the kinds of questions that, frankly, they tried to trip Christ up with in the New Testament. And I'll give you the answer that he gave. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I mean, ultimately, what is it's not just the letter of the law we are called to uphold, but also the spirit of it. All right. And so, does God say murder is wrong?
Yes.
Yes. Is there an exception on the day of is there a day of the week that you can be an accessory to murder and it's not wrong because it was the Sabbath?
An accessory to murder?
Yeah, can you be an accessory to murder? There isn't one?
No.
Why? Because murder's always wrong? So in the 10 Commandments, which one came first? Murder, don't murder, or obey the Sabbath? Which one came first?
Obey the Sabbath.
Well, yes. Okay, but how were they prosecuted?
Much different.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is, if Jesus' disciples are starving, does he let them starve to death because it is the Sabbath? No. So there's a hierarchy of values here. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. That doesn't mean that the Sabbath is not important. But what is its importance? Only human beings could take a vacation day from God and turn that into a legalistic argument. I mean, to me, one of the greatest proofs of total depravity is one of the things human beings have argued about more than any other in the entire history of the biblical era is how to Sabbath. How to take a vacation day from God. Of all the things to slit each other's throats over, that this is the one. Okay, so let's look at context, right? I love the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah goes off on people because they are working on the Sabbath. But what is the work they are doing? They're letting foreigners into the temple area and conducting just matters of straight up commerce. So it's not just that they are violating the letter of the law, because those same foreigners, by the way, we find out in the book of Nehemiah, their people are also marrying those people. Their kids are speaking the language. Nehemiah says, our children speak the language of Ashdod, but do not know the language of our forefathers. So it's not just the keeping of the letter of the law, but what is the spirit of the law? And that is the point of the Sabbath. It is not for some tightly recognized tribunal on what it means to take a day off, and only depraved sinners that we are would turn it into that. It's a gift. It's a God-ordained vacation day. It's a day of rest. Only human beings could then say, well, that day of rest must mean we have to argue over how many steps I can take to go to the bathroom. Should a doctor be on call at a hospital? I guess if my kid's choking to death, the doctor was made sure to observe the Sabbath in all of its technical righteousness. So I guess my kid just chokes to death. This stuff all sounds very silly, I think, when it comes out of my mouth. You know why I think it sounds silly? Because it's silly. What is the spirit of this, not just the letter of it? And frankly, I will tell you, if the letter of following the Sabbath is like the bane of your existence, you're probably a troll or an idolater. Because it's a gift. It's not something to be legalistically hoarded over people. That doesn't mean it's not really important. But when it was abused in the past, it was abused not just because of the letter of the law, but the spirit of it. Nehemiah didn't say, hey, an alien and sojourner was walking through the land, and his son was racked with fever, and you went out to help and care for his son on the Sabbath. How dare you? Is that what Nehemiah condemned? No, you're practicing commerce, just straight up commerce with foreigners that you're intermarrying with. Okay, further dilution of your own culture and legacy. Again, the spirit of the law. I mean, if you want to write journals about what specific day it has to be, or how many things we can actually do, or what rest looks like for you and doesn't look like for somebody else, congratulations, man. You missed your calling. You should have belonged to the Sanhedrin. That's my answer.
All right, next fairly lengthy question here. Mike Scott Nye says, Steve, a two-part question with a little background for some context. My girlfriend has PTSD and is bipolar. She was recently hospitalized during a particularly bad episode.
Hold on, did this happen on the Sabbath? Because hopefully there were no people there to care for her because we can't do any work on the Sabbath, of course. But I digress. Go ahead.
While there in the hospital chaplain, yes, chaplain, told her she's an empath and that she has psychic abilities, and then went on to baptize her. Now she feels spiritually empowered by this experience and has doubled down on New Age mysticism. She won't even hear my concerns about it because it's coming from someone she sees as a religious authority. How can I even begin a faithful and loving conversation with her about this when she's convinced this is a legitimate Christian experience? That's the first question. Second question is this, and more broadly, how are Christians supposed to actually grow in their faith when people entrusted with spiritual leadership are peddling heresy to the most emotionally and mentally vulnerable among us?
Well, number one, I'm sorry, brother. That's demonic what's happened to your girlfriend. That's awful. Number two, though, the answers to your questions are really the same answer. The most important thing that you could do, if you're not doing it already, is to get yourself into and her with you if you can, into a faithfully witnessing, Bible-believing, and preaching church. That is the most important thing that you could do. Because the contentions between the two of you are not theological, primarily. They're ecclesiastical. Who is the authority? And the theological questions will stem from how the first question is answered. This heretic gave her an idol, and that because that idol gave her meaning in her suffering that whatever her church experience up until this point sadly has not offered for her. And we greatly need and desire to have meaning in our suffering, purpose in it. And unfortunately, much of the modern Christian church will teach you suffering is to be avoided, frankly. Or worse, will play into victimology. So this made her and others like her a mark for the one who comes along and finds purpose and meaning for her in her suffering. So you need to get the two of you, but at least you, into a church that teaches the full counsel of God. Because ultimately, if this question, your relationship will not survive a question of authority between you and this occultic guru, demonically influenced individual. You're going to lose. Because this individual gave her something you can't ever give her. Purpose in her suffering. You can't give that to her. You're just a man. So that has to come from something or someone representing something or someone transcendent. So you got to get into a church that understands these things, preaches the full counsel of God, because she needs to come over. She's under a level of spiritual authority now. She is what Paul talks about in terms of principalities and strongholds. She's under a stronghold now. So you're going to need to expose her to something stronger than that stronghold. And brother, that ain't you. I can promise you that, because it's not any of us. So you got to take her to church. And if she won't go, you got to get yourself there ASAP. And whatever church you're going to together right now that did not provide that for her, don't ever go back. Because they had windows by which they could provide this for her and did not. So you've got to get under a church that understands the sovereignty of God, the authority of His Word, because you're in a battle of authority now, a battle for dominion. And the spirit of the age has dominion over your girlfriend right now because it gave her something that she believes was lacking. And she's right, by the way. She's right, by the way. Unfortunately, just the mechanism by which she has scratched that itch is what is wrong. Either one of you want to add any to that?
Nope.
I mean, you just go look back at the chain of events that he laid out for us. That sounds like a witch casting a spell, is what it is. Mm-hmm. Next, we go to Terry Tigner, who says, whatever happened to the Florida grand jury investigation into COVID that was supposed to be so devastating?
You know what?
It came out, didn't it?
They came out. I completely forgot about this till I just saw this question. They came out with a provincial report. That was like in last winter.
Yeah,
winter of 24.
It's been a spell.
I think it was like right before or right after the Iowa caucuses, right? And then I have no idea whatever happened with their final report. That's a good question, man. I don't know.
Thomas Hinshaw asks, what does it take to banish George Soros, his family, and fundraising capabilities from the USA forever? What's holding Trump back on this?
We are not a nation of laws, and we never have been. We're a nation of political will, and we always will be. I mean, it just kind of comes down to that. Now, I'm at the point, I'm not comfortable how much we have to ask one person to do. I'm just really not comfortable with it. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that if you're the head of DOJ or something, you would probably offer up as a suggestion. Would certainly be a boost to your political credentials to do so. But it's a good question. But ultimately, never forget, we're not a nation of laws, and we never have been. We're a nation of political will, and we always will be. And so the reason why we keep going back and asking Trump to do everything is because we all at least subconsciously recognize that whatever will is going to be needed to make any of these kinds of things we want done is probably going to have to originate from him or somebody that he has empowered on his behalf. Which, by the way, man, that's a terrible position for any movement to be in. We got one really good general, guys. Or one general who's even trying to general, okay? If he goes down, we got nothing, okay? That's not a good position to be in. But, take a drink. By and large, it's the position we're in. Anybody want to argue with that?
Yeah, we don't have a movement. There's no movement.
We don't. No, we don't. And it hasn't been for several years. I mean, responding to Tucker this weekend, Trump said something that I know will make a lot of people in our audience uneasy, and I get why, because of what it means historically, but it's also very true.
Yeah, I know what you're about to say.
And it's when he said, listen, the term America First and MAGA came from me, so I'm going to be the final word on what it means and not Tucker Carlson. That's what he said. Yep. And you know what? I understand why that makes those of us, particularly who came out of, reading the Russell Kirks of the world and the traditional conservative movement, and love our providential history. I can understand why it makes you uncomfortable.
But he took a bullet for it too.
Yeah, but he did take a bullet for it. But it is true. Whether you like it or not, whether it makes you comfortable or not is irrelevant because it's true. I mean, we're in the era of Red Caesars now because we gave up on governing ourselves a generation ago. Hey, this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at MD Hearing. It's 2025. Are you still paying thousands of dollars for hearing aids that may not even work? Well, MD Hearing makes you high-quality, easy-to-use, rechargeable hearing aids with exceptional sound quality that are personalized to your hearing profile. They cost a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. In fact, their new Neo model cost over 90% less than clinical hearing aids. That Neo fits right there inside your ear, so no one's even going to know it's there. And then they just launched the Neo XS, by the way. That's their smallest hearing aid ever. And how do they do this? Well, MD Hearing was founded by an ENT surgeon who saw many of his patients needed hearing aids but could not afford them. So he made it his mission to develop quality hearing aids that anyone could afford. Plus, MD Hearing has sold over 2 million hearing aids, and they offer a 45-day risk-free trial with 100% money-back guarantee so you can buy with confidence. All right. Get the high quality, affordable hearing aids you deserve with MD Hearing. Go to shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $297. Plus, they're adding a free extra charging case. That's a $100 value just for listeners of the show. That's shopmdhearing.com. Use our promo code Steve. Get a pair of hearing aids for just $297. Shopmdhearing.com. That's shopmdhearing.com and use the code Steve.
Next up, we will go to Roland, who says this question is for Todd primarily. I grew up a Catholic all the way until I was 18 years old. How do you explain the Catholic Church's explanation that Mary was a virgin all the way until she died? I do believe absolutely that she was a virgin until she gave birth to Jesus Christ, but there's really no any good reason that she wouldn't have normal relationships with her husband after that fact, nor is there any spiritual or any other possible reason that God would not want her to have the normal relationships with her husband. So why do the Catholics believe this about Mary?
This is not Ask Todd Anything. This is Ask Steve Anything. I found this one interesting because I don't think this is primarily a Catholic question necessarily spiritually, but because I trust Steve and Aaron so much, I just wanted to see how they received how this was written, because I think this is just what do you think the Bible says about this?
I don't believe Mary was a perpetual virgin. I think James and Jude were Jesus's half brothers. I think Mary was an extraordinary woman, but no one in the book of Acts, which is the earliest chronicle we have to the apostolic era, nobody in the book of Acts prays to her. I think that we have one Redemptor in Jesus Christ, and I think that it's a fine line. You know, I'm trying to remember, because I think Keith Nestor and I talked about this when we recorded a podcast with Keith, did we not? Didn't I bring this up and had to get his answer?
I think so.
So you guys haven't heard this one yet, but one of the special editions we have in the pipeline in the future is with Keith Nestor, former evangelical minister, who's has now a very successful Catholic show. And he speaks around the country and things of that nature, and is a big fan of our show. So we had some of these conversations with him. So that's why I was kind of pausing and remembering when him and I had that conversation. But I think that the center of our debates should be over Christ and Christ alone, and that the amount of times that he is mentioned in the Old and New Testaments outweighs every other figure. And he's the most important figure in all of human history. And so I spend pretty much all my energy on debating that and the consequences and ramifications of that.
What was your follow-up question, Todd?
My follow-up question?
Yeah, like how you wanted to know how we received this?
Yeah, I mean, are you a one-to-one where, I mean, when you're reading and nodding along, are you this, or you're like, well, I'm just kind of curious if that was, because I don't, I think what Steve pointed out, it's so interesting how we will talk, show me scripture, show me where it's in the Bible. But we all, the Catholics and Protestants, when we think it suits us, we will fall on context. And other times,
on that I agree. I've made that point many, many times.
Because when it comes to baptism, infant baptism, and there was a question about that I didn't bring in, but oftentimes Catholics will go to a context about what a household means and things like that. Well, here, you can't go to the, I mean, come on, man. Joseph and Mary were shagging on the regular. Can we turn the whole thing around? Show me in scripture. And I believe if you want to argue from the context point of view, I think you can without being an insane person. But can you show me in Scripture where they were getting down on the regular? See, I put this in there because I think it has to do with the level of integrity we bring to all of our biblical exegesis. And so I just think we need to hold each other accountable on these lines.
I don't disagree with that, which is exactly why I went to a reference in Acts, which in terms of context is the first known chronicle we have of the Acts of the Apostles and how they carried forth the apostolic era. That's why I went to that specifically for the answer to my question, because in general, I agree. I have friends on the Protestant side that absolutely believe in infant baptism. I have friends on the Protestant side who absolutely do not. Okay. I have friends who absolutely believe that there will be a rapture followed by a 3.5 year period of tribulation by which the Antichrist rules the earth. I have friends who believe that rapture will take place after the Antichrist arises, or will not take place at all, or that there is no such thing as a rapture. So I don't disagree with the broader context of that, of your statement there. I don't.
I mean, my reaction reading that was, and I quote, "I'm Protestant." To me, it seems like veneration of Mary, perpetual virginity of Mary. This is just and I'm not trying to condescend. I'm not trying to insult at all. That's not my motivation. But when I see this discourse online about this specific topic amongst Catholics that I see discussing it, it reminds me a lot of the color-coded rapture chart that evangelicals that you've talked about, Steve. I'm not saying they're equivalent on any level, but it just seems very convoluted, but with a great deal of vigor and specificity at the same time. Next, we go to Lucas Stump. There have been several preachers and prominent Christians who have fallen in recent years in various ways. Examples include Ravi Zacharias, Matt Chandler, Tony Evans, Steve Lawson, Josh Bice, and Michael Tate. Why is this happening so often? Has it always been this bad and we just hear about these cases more often today with technology? Is the church currently under higher than normal demonic attack? Is it just the circle of famous Christians that I follow, or does this extend across all denominations? I've always tried to be careful who I listen to, and I'm starting to wonder if any famous or popular Christian is sincere in their faith or just performing for the cameras.
Well, number one, I would not put all those people and the various purposes and points of their falling away as morally equivalent to one another. But I'm fine with the fact that, because not all those situations are the same, but at least as far as we know. But you're right, there is in general a rash of these. Let me see. Samson, fornicator, disobedient, married an idolatrous woman. Gideon, same book, ends up, he's a polygamist, and his family ends up turning away from the Lord. Abraham, adulterer, and an adultery that led to the spawn of what we now, the tribe of Ishmael, which is what Islam refers to as its line of descendancy. David, accessory to murder, polygamist, faithless disobedience, would not punish a son for the rape of a daughter, serial adulterer. You ever been to like a Christian youth sporting event? Like flag football or soccer? I picked these names for a reason. It's like every boy there named Samson, David, Gideon. See my point? There's no heroes. There never has been. Jesus is the hero. Moses is not allowed to enter in the promised land. He won't obey God. He won't speak to the rock. He's punished. So the answer to all of your various questions is yes. Do we have a unique celebrity influence in our culture of this age, and therefore a desire to elevate people before they have been properly vetted. I used the John and Kate +8 example for years. Okay, Zondervan couldn't wait to give them a 7-figure book deal by season 2. All right, Kate's moved out, and John's burning heaters in between, bumping uglies with the maid. Okay, I mean, this is just, yes, we have our culture is predisposed in particular to a certain level of celebrity idolatry, but this has been a problem all throughout history. Because human nature is the problem, and so, therefore, by the grace of God, go I. You guys know I went through a period of time in my own life 5 years ago where I was doing what I could to make sure having a Father's Day one day where 4 generations of my family would get together under my roof never ever happened. Okay, so that's who we all are. We are all, as the Joker once said to Batman, you're one bad day away from being on my side of this equation. And all of us are. We're all one bad day away, one bad decision away. Every single one of us. That's why, by the way, we have to die daily. Okay? So there really aren't any heroes. I mean, the man that God chose to be the progenitor of the 12 tribes of Israel, his name actually translates to schemer or usurper. There's really not any heroes. Okay, Catholics consider Peter the first bishop of the church. Jesus once looked at him and said, "Hey, you're the devil. Get behind me." Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, had falling outs with people. Other members of the church, other apostles. And now today, social media makes everybody's warts, just like it builds up celebrity too intensely, it makes everybody's warts too intense at the exact same time. Everything is amplified. Now, I also believe we're in a unique situation where you're absolutely watching spiritual warfare play out, and we're just calling it news because we don't know what else to call it in our godless age. So I think the answer to your questions are all yes, but I think we need to have some historical perspective. If you named your kid after a biblical figure, I have a son named Noah. Okay? After he lands the ark, gets drunk and gets naked. Okay? I mean, there really aren't any heroes, guys. There really aren't any. There's one, and his name is Jesus. He's the hero. Everybody else is like SEC football teams in the 1980s. You're never off probation. You're just in between.
All right, next we go to Christopher Watts. With these drone attacks that just happened in Russia and Iran, the drone scare that happened a few months ago, do you remember that? Mm-hmm. In this country are somehow related. Either it was a trial run or maybe we let Ukraine and Israel remotely operate these drones for practice? What do you think about that?
I think it's very possible the previous administration would have let Ukraine. I think the previous administration probably let Ukraine fire drones at Americans, probably. So I think that's possible. I don't think it's nuts. Yeah. I mean, I don't think the previous administration would have let Israel do it, though.
When did the drone thing happen?
A lot of it was over Christmas, remember, right around December and January. Yeah.
And we were doing shows, what is the story going to be when we come back? And
Yep.
And I had totally forgotten about it. That's what happens in this news cycle.
Yep.
Next, we go to Michael Bell, who says, dementia is in my family. Saw my grandmother suffer with it for far too long. Since I'm also autistic, it gives me a higher chance of it on top of the family history. So my question is, how can someone finish well when their mind is gone?
Well, I think ultimately you have to trust that a Lord who does not spare even his own son on behalf of his elect would practice that level of grace and mercy upon someone in that kind of a condition. And then I also believe there's no such thing, there's no wasted ammo in the kingdom of God. So if your grandmother is gone with dementia, she is still here for a reason. That reason may be she's going to be used by the Lord to teach you guys a few things that you need to know and you need to experience. Okay, but she's here for a purpose and a reason. There aren't any wasted resources in the kingdom of God. And then I think if once that kind of a diagnosis comes in, I mean, I would tend to think the faithful, obedient response would be a recognition now, or something like an Lou Gehrig's disease or something like that, where you just checked in at the Hotel California. We're only debating the stay. Okay, you can check in anytime you like, but you're never leaving. Okay, so once you know that's you, I mean, I would think that the motivation at that point to finish as well as I could while I still have that kind of faculty about me. I mean, I would think that would stir your soul to that end. I would think. All right.
I think that's all we're going to have time for, because the next one is way too long. I would finish reading it, and then it would be time to end the show.
Okay. Gentlemen, we got a minute left. What do you think? Final thoughts on today?
Well, after logging in and taking a look at this, and this is why I said I don't know what you're going to think about this, other than to say that our audience is reflective of the nation at large. We are spiritually starving for answers. Look at these questions. People obviously aren't getting what they need on Sundays, and that is just a damn shame.
Cases. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I go back and forth. When you see the falling away or the missteps of people who fashion themselves as spiritual leaders or personalities, whatever, that have a large platform. That's what I'm trying to say. Is this indicative of a decaying church, or is it indicative of the Lord chastening the church? I go back and forth on that.
That's a good point. Good interjection by you there.
So,
yep,
that's where I come down on this.
Yep. And it ain't like some pruning doesn't need to be done.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, we're back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.